Tav Kufnun Gimel Amud Aleph right at the top. Continuing on with the discussion about the Neshama of Tzadikim and Olam Haba. Amar Rabbi Yehuda the Rav Shmuel Bar Shila Simshnei the Rav Mehespeda Shal Adam Nikar Im Ben Olam Haba Hu Im Lav. From the hesped of a person, you can determine if he's a Ben Olam Haba. If he's a tzaddik, if he's a Ben Olam Haba, so then the people will hear the hesped, they'll be emotional, they'll be moved, they'll be crying. If he is not a Ben Olam Haba, they won't. Frank the Gemara, is that so? Ini v'amar leRav Shmuel Bar Shilas achem behespeda. He told him, give a varma hesped, give a hesped, make sure that the hesped you give is an emotional varma hesped. Tahasam akaimna, because I will be standing there. So now, if we say that a Ben Olam Haba, the people they'll be moved, they'll be emotional, why did he have to tell him that to give a strong, warm hesped? His zikr was a Ben Olam Haba. And if you're saying that a Ben Olam Haba, the hesped, the people will be moved by the hesped, so there would be no need for him to tell him, to instruct him to give a varma hesped. Moran says, "Lo kasha, it's not a kasha. It doesn't mean that it's automatic. If it's a hesped where it's a warm hesped, the mechamale where they warm up the audience, then ve'achim, and they become emotional. If he stirs the audience and they become emotional, then he's Ben Olam Haba. If, in spite of a varma hesped, they don't become emotional, they're not moved, then it shows that he's not. But effort has to be made in the hesped. They have to give a hesped that's capable of warming up the people. Amrle Abayla Rabba Kigain Mar. Abaya said to Rabba, like you, Rabba, the son of Laikula Pumbedisoi, the people of Pumbedisa, that's where he lived, they hated him. Why did they hate him? So Rashi says, because he was the Mardasra, he used to give them Musar, and that's the proper way for the leader, is to admonish the people, to instruct them, direct them, and give them Musar. But Mela, the people over there in Pumbedisa were not not on a high madrega, they were on a low madrega. They resented it and they hated him for it. So he said, so therefore, but who's going to give a hesped? Who will give you a hesped that will move the people? The people hate you. He said, that's enough to give the hesped, and that will be sufficient to do what the hesped is supposed to accomplish. Who is a person that you can tell he's a Ben Olam Haba? You hear, the pasuk says, your ears heard something behind you saying that this is the way you should walk. Whether you turn right or left, this is the proper way. This is the way that you should walk. So therefore, then if you say, if the people by the hesped, if they say that this is the way you should walk, meaning you should emulate the nifter, you should be like the nifter. If by the hesped that they're saying that they tell the people that this is the way you should live your life, that shows that the nifter is a Ben Olam Haba. Something is, if the person, not only his friends are pleased with him, not only his family are pleased with him, but if his Rebbeim are pleased with him, with his conduct, that shows that he's truly a Ben Olam Haba. His conduct is the proper conduct because his teachers, his Rebbeim, then if they're pleased with the way he conducted his life, it shows that was the proper way, and he's a Ben Olam Haba. The pasuk in Koheles says, the ones who give the hesped, they'll travel around in the streets. B'nai Galila Amro, they used to say, Aseh dvarim lifnei mitzvos. In a person's lifetime, he should do ma'asim tovim, he should do mitzvahs in his lifetime, Aseh dvarim lifnei mitzvos, so that the seifdim, the ones who give the hesped, they used to give the hesped in front of the mitzvah, in front of the aron, that they'll talk about the good things that the person did. B'nai Yehuda Amro, Aseh dvarim la'achar mitzvos. they said, do things, and they said, so they'll talk about you, they'll give a hesped and talk about your ma'asim tovim. La'achar mitasa, behind the mita, behind the aron. There's no machlokes. It's just a different minhagim. Sometimes in certain regions, the maspidim used to give the hesped in front of the aron, and in other places it was behind the aron. You should do tshuva the day before the Yom HaMisa, before the time of the death. Shalot Hamid with Rabbi Elazar, but they ask him, how can he do tshuva a day before his death? Does he know there's Yom Misa, the day that he's going to be nifter? Amar lahem v'kol shekain, well, meaning therefore, certainly, Yashav Hayom Shem Yamos Lamachar V'nimsa Kol Yomav B'Shuva. Then every day, the point is that every day a person should view that perhaps this is the last day of his life. And therefore, every day he should be doing tshuva because tomorrow might be the Yom HaMisa. So therefore, his whole life is b'tshuva because he never knows, and therefore, this day might be his last day. Shlomo said in his wisdom, your clothing should always be white. And you should never be lacking with oil on your head. So meaning, you should always be clean, your neshama should be white and pure, you should always be b'tshuva, you should always be, your entire life, that you should be, every day, you should be always pure and clean and tohar. It's a mashal to a king, a human king that invited his servants to a banquet, to a big suda, but he didn't say when it's going to be. So Pikim shebehem kishtu es asman, the wise ones, so they got themselves ready. The Suda might be any day. So they got themselves ready, they dressed themselves properly, big day covered. V'yashu al Pesach Beis HaMelech. And they sat and waited on the doorway to the palace. The king might call them at any time, so they were always constantly ready. One rule, klum chosher lebeis hamelech, is there's nothing missing the king. The king could call the banquet at a moment's notice. There's nothing missing over there, there's nothing lacking, so they could put together a huge banquet at any moment. So they were constantly ready and waiting for the time that the banquet would be called. That was the wise ones. But Tipshim Shebehem, the foolish ones, Halchim Malachtim, they went to the work, and they went to work, and they were not ready for the banquet. Omro, Klum Yesh Suda B'Loi Toyach. There's Suda, to prepare a big Suda, it takes time, you have to work on it. And they said, okay, it'll be later, it won't be now. So they did not prepare themselves for the Suda. So suddenly, the king called the banquet. Suddenly the king said, okay, it's time for the Suda. So the Pikim came in, and they were all ready. They were dressed properly, and the big day covered, so they went into the banquet. But the foolish ones who did not prepare themselves, they went out to do their own personal needs, their own work, and now suddenly it was time for the banquet. They came in and they were all dirty. He was happy with the Pikim, the cross Tipshim, but he was angry at the Tipshim. Omar, the king said, Halal shekishtu es atzman, the Suda, the wise ones that prepare themselves for the Suda, yesh v'yachal ishtu, they should come in and eat and drink. Halal shaloi kishtu asman Suda, but the foolish ones who did not prepare themselves, yam davira, should just stand and watch. So meaning it's a moshel lo'ilam haba. The person might be called to the Suda, to the Mishnah, in Oilam Haba at any time, so he always has to constantly be ready. The Pikim are always ready. The king can call any time. The foolish ones are Isaac in their own needs, are pursuing Oilam Haza, and when the time comes, they're not ready. So the king said that the foolish ones should just yamdu v'yiru, should stand and watch. He says, no, that's not exactly the way it is, because if the foolish ones come in and they just stand and watch, it still is a measure of kavod for them because they look like they're servants. So they look at least like in some way they belong over there, even though they're not the invited guests, but they look like they belong, that they're not totally out of place. Eli says, rather, the mashal is, they both come in and sit. Even the foolish ones don't stand, they sit. Halal oichlim, the pig eat, halal ravim, and the foolish ones are hungry. Halal shaisim, the wise ones drink, halal tzmeim, and the foolish ones are thirsty. So there it shows clearly that these ones, that the foolish ones, really have no place here. My servants will eat, but you'll be hungry. And my avodim, they'll drink, and you'll be thirsty. My servants will rejoice and sing from the gladness of the heart. And you, the foolish ones, will cry in anguish from ke'ev lev, from heartache. Another pshat, when it says your clothes should always be white, that's a reference to tzitzis. That's tzitzis. The tzitzis are white. And as the Maharsha explains, and the tzitzis are white, even though there's tchelis, which is blue, but if there's no tchelis, it's white. So tzitzis is a reference to white. And v'shemen al roishcha al yechsar, and should not be lacking oil on your head. Elu tefillin. That's a reference to tefillin, which is on the head. And Rashi explains, and it says v'shemen, and oil is also a shemen, a shmon, and the shem, the name of the Rebbeinu Shalom. The shem there is in the tefillin, and that should be on your head. Hadr lach shayel, hadr lach shayel, hadr lach shayel. New parak misha hechshech. Misha hechshech v'derech, if a person was on the road, and now it started to turn dark. So it's hard to turn dark, and now he's on the road, and he has his wallet with him, he has his money with him. So Misha hechshech v'derech noisim kisel nachri, he can give it to a goy, to a nochri, to carry it back from him. Now, as we'll see in the Gemara, we'll discuss, normally we say that you're not allowed to give or tell a goy to do something, you're not allowed to tell a goy to do something, to do what you can't do. Amir l'nochri shus. And over here, we're making a special kula. There's a special heter that if a person is traveling on the road, and now Shabbos is approaching, we're afraid that if we don't make a kula over here, the person, number one, there'll be a hefsed moment. He'll come to live, he has to leave his money on the road, he'll come to lose the money. And number two is that we're afraid that perhaps he won't be able to restrain himself, and therefore we're afraid that he'll come to carry it himself on Shabbos. So therefore, we made the Chachamim were mekel, and they said, even though normally Amir l'nochri d'shvus, under these circumstances, it's mutter to give it to a nochri to bring it back for him. Noisen kisel l'nochri, v'im eini moy nochri menich al chamor. And if he doesn't have a nochri to give it to, then he just leaves it on the donkey, and the donkey brings it back to him, to his home. Now here also, it's also to have a person's chamor, to have his animal working. So it says loisaz kol malacha, and it says b'emtecha. You can't have your animal work for you on Shabbos. So here also, we make a kula. And we allow him to leave it on the donkey. So we'll see in the Gemara, we'll discuss, l'cher, this is an Isser D'Oraisa. And how can we be mater and Isser D'Oraisa? Bishlama Amir L'Nochri is a Shvus D'Rabbanan. But for your animal to work is a D'Oraisa. So we'll see in the Gemara, what are the circumstances over here that you do in fact let you have the animal bring it back for you. We can't be mater D'Oraisa, so we'll see in the Gemara. So we are mekel in these cases because of the hefsed moment, and we're afraid the person will not restrain himself. Rashi says, Misha hechshech, he says, Neisin kisa, the nochri, Rashi says, mi ba'ayid yom. So Rashi's mashma that this has to be done before Shabbos, that you can't do it on Shabbos. You can instruct the nochri before Shabbos. even though it's also to tell a Nochri before Shabbos to do something on Shabbos, we're makel. But Rashi's mashal, there would be on Shabbos itself, that would be also. The Rosh says, no, even on Shabbos it's mutter. The going is medayik from the Rambam that where possible it should be done before Shabbos, but if not, then it can be done on Shabbos. So if a person's hechshich b'derech, he's on the road and he's traveling, and now Shabbos is approaching, we make these kulas. What about if he wasn't traveling? What about if he wasn't traveling on the road? Let's say he went out of his house, he wasn't traveling, he just left his house, and then he happened to be in the Rishus Rabbim, and he realized he forgot to remove his wallet, to remove his keys before leaving the house. So that's machlokes Rishonim, the Ramban, and the other Rishonim have machlokes. Do we say that this is a heter davka for a traveler, or do we say no? This is just the common case. That's why the Mishnah mentions it, but it doesn't mean davka that it has to be someone who's traveling. Even if a person forgot and he went out of his house with his wallet and he happens to be in the street, that we would also make this heter. So if there's a Nochri, he gives it to the Nochri. If there's no Nochri, Menich Hamor leaves it on the donkey. Now when the donkey comes to the outside, the outer courtyard, the Chotzer of the city, so now you can't leave it on the donkey because it's Tsar Balechaim, the Rishonim speak out, so it has to be removed. So Noitel is a Kelim Nitalim B'Shabbos, that which is not Muksa, which is Kelim Nitalim, you can remove it. Ushein and Nitalim B'Shabbos, but the ones that are Muksa, so you can't remove it by hand, Mata, Chavolim, Asakim, Nofne Meilam. You untie the ropes, and the sacks on their own, they just fall to the ground. Zok the Gemara, my time is Shal Rabban Olameis of Kisel and Nachri. Why did the Rabbanan say it's mutter to give a kiss to the Nachri? Gemara answers, Kimlu Rabbanan, that they determined the Ein Adam Mamin Atzma Alma Moina. A person, we're afraid he won't restrain himself when it comes to a loss of money. And Eloi Sharisle, if you don't make this kula and you're not going to be matir to give to a Nachri, also will come to carry it himself, which is a deraisa, so therefore we're matter the derabanan, so he's not over the deraisa. That's only where it's his wallet, so it's a loss of money. But if he sees a lost object on the ground and he doesn't own it yet, it's not his yet, it's just a question of foregoing a potential gain, but it's not mamish a loss, we don't make this cool. So Pshita, the Gemara says, the more Pshita, Kisei Tanan, it says his wallet, so it's Kisei, it doesn't say Mitzia. The Gemara says, Maud is saying, you might think the Hud then if you Mitzia, you might think that it implies to Mitzia as well. Why does it say his wallet? Or the Milsa Katani, that's just a normal case. It just mentions a normal case. Kamash Malan, that we say no, it means Dafka. It means Dafka Kisa, but a Mitzia not. But that's only when the Mitzia has not yet come to his hands. But once he's Zaycha, now it's in his hands, it's like his already. It's like he owns it already. Now he owns it, it would be considered a loss, and we're afraid that he won't forego this loss, and it's not only potential gain, once it's in his hands, it's a loss, and we're afraid he won't restrain himself when it will come to carry. Some say, boy, Rav had a shayla. What is the din if he already picked up the mitzvah, it already came to his hand? Do we say that once it's in his hands, it's like a kisei oidima, or do we say no, that even though it's in his hands, we don't consider it like his kis, like it's his wallet, because even though it's in his hands and he's the owner, but he didn't work for it, it was a windfall. So we're not so concerned about the loss of this windfall, and therefore we're not concerned he won't restrain himself. Teku, according to this approach, the Mitzia Bal Yodai is a teku. Any my nachri, so the Mishnah says if there's no nachri, then you leave it on the donkey. Time adeni my nachri, that's only if there's no nachri. Ha yeshi my nachlin nachri avli. But if there is a choice, if there's a Nachri, we say rather give it to the Nachri rather than leave it on the Chamor. My taima, what's the reason? More answers Chamor, Atam Mitzuvel Shisos. The Chamor, like we mentioned before, there's an Issa Doraisa. Nachri, Atam Mitzuvel Shisos. A Nachri is no, it's not Midoraisa. The Yisoid is a Dorabonan. Amir al Nachri Shus. The Behema in the Makar is a Doraisa. Now we'll see what are the circumstances here that we allow you to leave it on the donkey. But the Chamor upon him is more Chomer because it's Ikra Midaraisa. There is a Daraisa case of the Nachri transporting the item. By the Nachri, it's no Ikra Midaraisa, it's Kula Darabonan, so it's more Kuladik. We prefer that having the Nachri do it rather than the Chamor. The Gemara says that Chamor v'cherev v'shoita v'katan. Well, we're talking about if you have choices. Well, let's say that choice is that there's no Nachri, but there's a Chamor v'cherev v'shoita v'katan. Or alternatively, you can give it to a Cheresh or a Shoita or a Katan. What do you choose? So the Gemara answered, Chamor monochle, you leave it on the Chamor. And rather than give it to a cheresh shoyt v'katan, but l'cheresh shoyt v'katan lo yoyv, you don't give it to cheresh shoyt v'katan. My taima, why is that? Because hani adam v'hani lav adam, because these are people, and the tzivui on to restrain people from doing a malacha is more chomor, more severe than for an animal. Cheresh v'shoyta, if your option is the choices between a cheresh, between a person who's a deaf mute or a shaita, l'shaita, you choose a shaita, because a shaita has no understanding at all. The cherish, his level of understanding is more than a shaita. So therefore, you give it to the shaita. Rather, give it to the shaita whose level of understanding is less. Shaita v'katan, it's a shaita v'katan. You give it to a shaita. Then you give it to a shaita. So now the Gemara's next shaila is going to be a cheresh v'katan. If your option is between a cheresh and a katan, what do you choose? Which we'll see the answer will be on the next Amud. Taisus points out that we learned before that when a katan wants to extinguish a fire, we restrain him from extinguishing the fire because we say that the katan does it al das aviv. That really it's like the father is instructing him to do it. So we do restrain the katan. Now here we're saying that we entertain giving it to a katan, have a katan do it. So why should we entertain having a katan do it over here? And then why don't we say, just like we say before, that we restrain him from extinguishing the fire because he's Zoysal Das Aviv. Taisus says because what we're talking about over here is where the katan is not doing mamash the malacha. He's not doing akira and hanacha. So when we entertain allowing it for a katan to do it, and when we do, if the only option is to have a katan to do it, then in this case we only allow him to do it in a case where it's not a malacha gemura, where he's not doing the akira and he's doing the halacha, he's carrying, but he's not doing the akira and hanacha.